We continue with our series titled Old School. If you haven't gone back and watched the other 4 episodes, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and check those videos out. This Old School series that we're doing is talking about the book of Job. And if you've ever read the book of Job, or even just looked through the book itself, you can easily see that there are some names repeated in the titles of the chapters. The reason for this is because the majority of the book of Job is just a dialogue between Job and his friends. As I was studying this, I was shocked with just how much Job and his friends can talk. More than 25 chapters out of the 42 chapters of Job are dedicated to their conversations. And I don't know about you, but I think that's a lot of talking. But then, I started to think about when I get together with my best friends and how we can just talk for hours and hours and hours on end about everything. And so then suddenly 25 chapters didn't seem too much. Kind of made sense. I'm sure there's somebody in your life that you can think of that, they're just a really good friend or someone you're really close to that you can just talk to for hours and hours. And this is kind of the glimpse that we're getting here with Job. But their conversation tends to go a little up and down as we'll look at it. Today we're really going to dive into their dialogue. We're not really going to focus on the content of what they're talking about because more than 25 chapters, it would take a long time to cover those things. So we're going to focus more on the events and the intentions that they had throughout their conversation. So let's start in the beginning. If this whole book is about Job's struggles, right? We've been studying this book. We know that he's gotten tested by the Lord and he's lost a bunch of stuff. Things has happened to his body. So how did Job's friends kind of just appear in this story? If we look at Job 2:11 through 13, I'll kind of give you like a summary of it. It tells us that 3 of Job's friends, they heard about the troubles that Job was going through. And so they decided to get together and go to him and sympathize with him as well as comfort him during this hard time. Once they were getting close to where he was, from a distance, they saw Job, but they couldn't even recognize him. So what did they do when this happened? They ended up weeping very loudly. And they tore their clothes and they sprinkled dust on their heads, which again, if you remember from one of our last episodes, that was a way for them to show that they were mourning. So they were mourning on behalf of Job in this time. Once they arrived to him, they ended up sitting with him for 7 days and 7 nights. And none of them said a word because they saw how great Job was suffering. They really felt bad for him. And so Job's friends, they were there for him. They were there for him in this great time of suffering. So we also need to seek out friends who are going to be there for us in our hard times, during our struggles. The intent of Job's friends was good. They wanted to go to him to sympathize and to comfort him. And we need friends that are going to come to us in hard times, that are going to cry with us, that are going to comfort us when we're sad. Friends that are going to show us that they're there for us in these difficult times. Now, let me tell you, by reading other parts of the book of Job, we can easily tell that Job's friends were not the best. And that's the thing with friends, because we're all human. The likelihood of friends failing us is pretty high. But the only friend who's never going to fail us is God. And that's why it's important to make him the center of your life. Because he's trustworthy, he's reliable, he's always there for you, and he's never going to fail for you. And more, because God's just amazing like that. But as we focus back on Job's friends, they went with this intent to comfort him. But as we continue to read the story, we can see how that began to change. Instead of encouraging Job, his friends began to condemn him. In hard times, we need to have friends that are going to encourage us. Sadly for Job, this was not what he received in his circumstances. And if we look at Job 16:2, Job is telling his friends here, "I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all." And we can read that and we're like, wow, Job, that's a little rough, But he's basically just telling them, you guys came to comfort me, and you're making me feel even worse. You're condemning me. And Job's friends, they were criticizing him in the midst of his pain. What Job needed was a friend who was going to uplift him, who was going to encourage him. Yet he received the opposite from his friends. Now, maybe you're thinking, what happened to his friends? Because they came with good intentions. They wanted to sympathize and comfort him, but how did they end up discouraging him and condemning him? And it all has to do with the fact that his friends believed that only good things happen to godly people, and that if you were going through something bad, it was because you had sinned. But of course, we know the story of Job, and we know that wasn't the case for him. But this is why they were acting in that manner. They thought they were doing good by trying to help him get out of his situation by telling him, just repent to the Lord and things will get better. But that's not why Job was going through what he was going through. But I encourage you, make sure that you have quality people in your life who sharpen you, who encourage you, who challenge you for better. Those are the people that you want around in times of difficulty and in times of struggle. There's something beautiful about having a friend who prays for you. I know that I'm super thankful for a friend that I have, that if I'm going through something or feeling something, I can easily text that friend and ask for prayer. And in that moment, that friend is going to send me a prayer, whether it's through a voice message or whether it's through text. But as I read that prayer or as I hear my friend praying for me, I'm just filled with so much strength, and I'm just encouraged by knowing that somebody took time out of their day to pray for me and what I'm going through. It reminds me that I'm not alone, and it reminds me that things are going to get better and that God's with me too. And I'm sure that Job, he would have wanted someone calling on the name of the Lord on his behalf. And if you have a friend who prays for you, I encourage you to hold on to them. If you don't have a friend who prays for you, I encourage you to find one. And that friend, it could be your spouse, it could be a family member, it could be your pastor, who knows? Just look for those people, those godly people around you that you know you'll be able to go to them and they're going to pray for you. And so it's very comforting to know that someone is praying for you and that somebody is with you in the midst of what you're going through, that they're believing that God's going to rescue you where you're at. So we need friends that are going to encourage us, friends that are going to be there for us, and we also need friends that are going to guide us in the right way, guide us in the ways of the Lord. Job's friends had an incomplete view of God. As we've learned a couple episodes ago, Job is one of the oldest books of the Bible. That means that this whole story happened a very long time ago. And, Jesus hadn't died yet. Jesus hadn't come. And so I'm sure that these people were just early on in their faith, and his friends were doing the best that they could. But they did have an incomplete view of God. They thought that, like I said, good things only happen to godly people, and that struggles in people's lives indicated that somebody had sinned and that they needed to repent. They tried to get Job to admit that he had committed a serious sin, even though Job hadn't. In this case, they were misguiding Job. As we read the story of Job, we know that these bad things that ended up happening to him, it wasn't because he had sinned. It was because he was going through a test, and his friends they didn't see it that way. Job knew as well. He knew he was a righteous man. He knew that he was good, that he had a relationship with God. But even as much as he tried to communicate this to his friends, they just couldn't believe it because of what he was living. And we see chapter after chapter that his friends continue to condemn him. And at the end, they end up just leaving because they don't want to answer him anymore. And they don't want to hear Job say that he's a righteous man. In the end, God ends up rebuking his friends for their misguided efforts. Again, maybe they didn't know any better. Maybe that's all that they knew because of their view of God, their perspective of God. But the way that they were guiding Job was incorrect. And while Job's friends condemned him, the amazing thing is that Job hung on to the confidence that God would restore him in the end. He said, "I know my Redeemer lives." He believed in the midst of his pain and suffering that God would restore him, that God would redeem him, and that God would save him. Job never gave in to his friend's condemnation, but he stood firm on the fact that he was righteous and that God would rescue him. We must stand firm and know that Christ is our Redeemer, no matter what we go through. Even if others try to misguide us, we need to keep our eyes on the Lord. I wonder how the book of Job would have been if his friends would have been there for him, would have encouraged him, and would have guided him in the right ways of the Lord. So, let's seek out those friends who are going to be there for us, who are going to encourage us, and who are going to guide us in the ways of the Lord. And even if our friends fail us, because again, we're all human, and so most likely that will happen at some point, may we never forget the greatest friend that we have, who will never fail us, and that is God. So I encourage you, if you don't have God as your friend, I encourage you to make him your friend. God can also be all these things for you. He will be there for you. He will encourage you. And who else can lead you in the ways of God than God himself? So I just encourage you to really just make God your friend. Seek out those godly friends in your life. And just like Job, believe that God's going to save you. Believe that God's going to redeem you in whatever situation that you're going through. So I hope that this encourages you, and may God continue to bless you.